So as I mentioned, this morning, we're going to be reviewing HTML and CSS. And to get started, we're just going to go way back to week one when nobody knew anything about commands to run from the command line. I want to create a folder with 2 files inside of it, and I want to change into that directory. We're all super familiar with it now, so I want to make a folder called HTML and CSS. So what's the command for that? Make dir HTML and CSS. Okay, I'm going to cd into HTML and CSS, and then how do I create a file? Remember when you had to really think about it for a little while, and now it's just second nature? All right, so we'll just do example.html and example.css. Open up everything inside of Sublime. We're going to put it over here. So going back to HTML, what does HTML stand for? And what's that?
Hypertext markup.
Yep, hypertext markup language. What does it do? If you had to explain it to like a 2-year-old, a 4-year-old, 2-year-olds can't understand anything.
It's a way to put text and images on the screen.
Not a bad thing. That is technically what it does, Sean.
It's used to label / mark up content. It's literally used to put labels on content.
Yeah.
That's all it does.
What about if you had to explain it to a 4-year-old?
It's a label maker.
A label maker. Okay, it's not bad. If you had to, so the way you can think that those are all true. If you wanted to explain it at like a really high level, it's like build. What happened?
Oh damn.
Well, hold on one. All right, I'm back. It's like the building across the street, the Chase Tower across the street. It's how tall it is. Like what, all the framing that goes into it, how many floors it has. It's the skeleton to your web page. It just includes all the content and all the structure. CSS, if you had to explain at a very high level, what does CSS stand for and what does it do?
CSS stands for Cascading Stylesheet.
Okay.
And it adds style for visuals to your HTML.
Yeah, so you can kind of think of if you had a building, like across the street, the HTML is the structure of the building, like the frame of the building. But if you wanted to talk about, I want this building to have all glass windows, or I want it to have like white stone like that, the coloring and the style of it is what CSS is going to do. So like I said, like everyone else said, HTML stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and it basically tells the web page the web browser, your Google Chrome or your Firefox, how to display a page. It separates the content from the presentation, and it just includes some tags. So we created a new file called example.html, and we just have an H1 that says this is a heading. If I refresh this page and open it up in the browser, I just have a giant thing that says this is a heading. If I were to break this down a little bit, we have an opening and a closing tag. Most tags need an opening and closing, and some do not. Some are self-closing tags. So this H1, I open it up. Everything that I type inside of it is called the content. Opening tag, content, and then closing tag. There's another one called emphasis, opening tag, content inside, and then closing tag. If I refresh the page at this point, you can kind of see the emphasis is basically italics. It takes everything that's inside of the opening and closing tag, the content in the middle, and then changes it so that it has this, it's surrounded in these tags, so it changes the visuals of this content. The combination of opening tag, content, and closing tag, those 3 things together create an HTML element. And the web is full of elements. If you just take a look over here and you right-click at any website that you would like we're going to use codeplatoon.org, you can kind of see I have an opening div over here and then a closing one somewhere all the way down in this section. let me click this. Exceptional, where is this? Why can't I click this? I have an opening tag, content in the middle, these words that show up, and then a closing tag at the very end. The web is like basically all HTML elements. And sometimes those elements have children. So let's say that we have a div and a closing div. And then inside of here I have a paragraph called, this is a paragraph in a div. When I refresh the page here, I get this is a paragraph within a div. So I've got an element here, and this element has one child element in the middle. We talked yesterday about block elements, like H1. They take up the entire width of the browser window. So I can type in this, maybe I'll type in an H2. This is a smaller heading. It takes up the width. Screen. When I refresh this page, you can kind of see that this is a heading, takes up literally the entire width of the screen. I can't put anything else on this particular line unless I put it inside the H1. The H2 is the same thing. It's a block element, so it takes up the entire width of the screen. Like I can't put literally anything else in its place. Those are block elements. There's also things called inline elements. So a paragraph is a block element, but something like an href, href equals an href, an ahref like this, is actually an inline element, meaning that when I throw, it only takes up the space of its content. So anything that's within this inline element, like this A or this, like with this particular A right here, only everything in the middle is being affected. If I wanted to do something like an emphasis outside of the ahref, you can kind of see right now it is just normal text. All right, if we refresh it, it turns this into italics. Again, it only takes up the space of its content. It's only going to affect this tiny little area, not the entire the entire thing. There's some really weird tags that I want to show off, but there's no shortage of different HTML tags that are available. So there's a really interesting one. I'm going to just copy it from here. And this is one of the strangest ones I've seen so far, and no one has any idea what it does. Can you guess what it's going to do?
It's going to reverse the words.
Yeah, I think so. I think this stands for bi-directional or something like that, and the direction that it's going to that the browser is going to change it is going to be right to left. And I believe this says, "May the force be with you," if I'm not mistaken. So, like, there are no shortage of tags. Most of them are going to be H1, H2, divs, p tags. Those are the ones you're going to use the most. But this is so stupid. I don't know why they would have this, a right to left, but maybe they want to show off something that'll be different when you look at it in a mirror. I'm not sure. But when I put this in here and I refresh the page, I get "May the force be with you," even though this thing is pretty nonsensical looking. It's reading right to left. I don't know what BDO stands for, real quick. BDO HTML. BDO stands for bidirectional override. It's used to override the current text direction. I guess that's kind of cool. Left to right and right to left, that's kind of interesting. I'm not sure when you would ever use it, but it is there. So HTML is fairly easy in the sense that it's what you see is what you get. If you put something in correctly, you'll see it show up correctly. If you put in something incorrectly, it's not going to show up the way that you expect. But HTML by itself looks like this, and nobody wants to visit a website that looks like this. So what we're going to do is we're going to try to write the CSS code. I'm going to throw this on the bottom to make this prettier. And with that, I'm going to need a head and basically say, inside of the head, when the browser first reads it, it says, like, what external things do I need? So if I'm going to require outside style sheets or outside JavaScript files or things of that nature, they all go inside the head. If we were to jump back to our code platoon, hopefully this doesn't freeze up on me like it's been doing for a while.
Isn't it best practices to put the JS at the bottom of the body?
That's a great question. So we'll cover that, I think, tomorrow. But the question was, should you put the script, the JavaScript stuff at the very bottom of the page? Yes, unless you have jQuery, and then you put it at the front top. And the reason behind that, and we'll see it in action tomorrow, is if you put JavaScript stuff at the top, it's waiting for the entire page to load, and it will execute before the page is loaded. So you put that at the bottom. But if you have a jQuery plugin, then you can just wait for the document to fully load, and then you put it at the top. Inside the head up here, you can see all of this extra looking strange code. There's a bunch of stuff that we need to call out to before we even load the page, and that's what goes inside of the head. So there's things that we can see, like the Code Camp for Veterans, Code Platoon, that's what you see up here in the title. But there's also a ton of other HTML and JavaScript and pictures that we need to bring in order for all of this page to even work. You see there's no shortage of things that we need. We can see if it's Internet Explorer 9, this is the particular JavaScript file that we want to load. Otherwise, we have Google Analytics running, meaning that it's keeping track of all the people who visit our website. Something that I'll teach you a little bit later. When you start putting so I actually left my last job as a result of this. But what we would do is, if you were on a web page and you were filling out some information, the moment you started typing your email address, we captured it. Like, we didn't even need to submit the form. It was the moment you started typing in your email address, we would capture it. And if you didn't fill out like the entire application, we'd send you an email saying, hey, we saw that you visited. Like, would you like to come back and complete your application? We had a snapshot of where you were. And that's all using things like the JavaScript that you see over here. Now, there's nothing harmful about Google Analytics. Every single website has Google Analytics or some sort of analytics on there. So they capture where you are, your internet service provider, like what kind of browser you're coming from based on the HTTP request coming in. And they basically capture a lot of information about you. That's going to happen no matter what. Like, almost every single website will do that so they can track, oh, this past month we had 3 million people visit the website. 2 months ago, we had 1 million people visit the website. What changed in that period of time? Like, what marketing efforts did we do to beef up that kind of, those types of numbers?
Is that paid or?
That is paid, yeah. You do have to pay for it. So even Code Platoon, we have analytics so that we see how many people visited the /apply page, and then what website did they visit right after that? Or like, what series of steps did they take to get to the point where you got to /apply? Those are valuable things, because if we didn't have the apply button directly in the middle here, but I think before it was like somewhere up here, and it looked like more of like you can now use your GI build for Code Platoon. Like, we realized that, hey, if you put it right in the middle here, more people hit the apply button, and then we see more numbers show up. So these are all extremely valuable things that HTML and CSS, the JavaScript plugins that you're going to need when you start writing code. But yeah, be careful of what you fill in online, because even though if you don't hit submit, I wrote the code, the JavaScript on the back end, so the moment you created it and clicked out of it, I already had your email address. And I decided to leave because I was like, this is not good practice. And they're like, sucks. I was like, all right, I'm gone. See you later. So we have our HTML document over here. I have a head and I have a body. Everything inside the head is external that I'm going to need to bring in. Everything that's inside the body is what's going to show up. I want to bring in this particular style sheet and then talk a little bit about CSS. So I don't know how to do that. HTML, bring in local style sheet. It's somewhere here. HTML's treehouse, sure. I had it yesterday. I just really don't remember what this is. Okay, there it is. So in the head, I'm going to link to a style sheet. It's going to be a CSS style sheet. And this is the href, like, where is it located? It can either be on the web or it can be locally. Locally, it's relative to where you are right now. So since I'm right here at HTML, example.html, and it's right next to example.css, I could just do example.css. And just to make sure that this works, I'm going to say for every single H1, I'm going to change the color. I'm going to change the background to blue. So it'll select all of the H1s on the page and change all of their backgrounds to blue. All right, so we know that this is working because obviously this background just changed to blue. So CSS means cascading style sheets. And the first word is really important, cascading. The emphasis on cascading means that the last line of style code to run is whatever is rendered inside of the browser. And I'll show you what that means right now, actually. Let's say we have an H1, and we say we're changing all of these H1s into the background is going to be blue. But let's say that we wrap this inside of a div. So now this H1 is a child of this particular div tag. And let's give the div ID of anything. Boop. So I've given this particular div an ID so that I have quick access to grab this particular this particular element, lines 6 through 8. Let's do, is it hashtag or is it dot? I think it's dot.
It's hashtag.
It's hashtag for an ID?
Yeah.
Okay, anything poop. So I've selected the ID called anything poop. And I'm going to change the background color to yellow. The emphasis on cascading style sheets means that the last bit of style code is what's going to get rendered out to the page. So you would think that because I'm wrapping this whole H1 inside of a div tag called anything poop and I'm changing that background to yellow, that what would show up on the screen is yellow. But because I'm selecting all H1s, which is more specific once I get down to the grain, like since the last bit of style code, this is a heading, should turn blue. So which color do you think is going to show up? Is it going to be blue or is it going to be yellow?
Yellow.
Yellow? Let's find out. Actually blue. So again, like I said, this whole thing is wrapped, it's cascading style sheets. So it starts at the very top and goes to the very bottom. If I didn't have this bit of code in here, this H1 code, yes, this would actually turn to yellow. But because I have this code that's more specific and it's the last line of code that ran, it overwrites the background color from being yellow and turning it into blue. That's the emphasis on cascading. And as I said, HTML and CSS, if you are building a building, the architecture of the building is the HTML. The color of the paint, the size of the windows, all those types of things are the CSS, the styling behind it. You can have external style sheets like this, or you can also have inline style sheets. So if I just throw in style equals color red, and then just throw it in like this, you can actually just refresh the page, and then you have inline style directly inside the HTML. Generally speaking, you do not want to do this because everything should do one thing, right? As much as possible, everything should do one thing. So your HTML should be in charge of HTML. Your style sheet should be in charge of all the style. Also, it's for most people, unless they know to look for the style inside of an HTML file, they're immediately going to look for a CSS file because that's generally how it's done. There's many other HTML properties. So if we were just to throw this in here, maybe we'll do style, say text align, center. At this particular point, when I refresh the page, I expect this just to jump into the middle. This is a heading. There's no shortage of styles that you're also able to do. The last thing I want to talk about with HTML, CSS before we take a break, before Road Home gets here. Let's say that you have a like this. You have a div ID. You have a class. You have a divs or a class or IDs with different style conflicts. Like for example, this particular div has X style, a class has Y style, and ID has Z style. Let's say we have a div right here, and we're going to throw another div class within it. And then this particular H1 has another ID of anything else. Like your browser's not really going to know what to do if you have conflicting styles. But generally there is specificity built into CSS, which means that the higher the weight, the greater the superiority when your styling conflicts do occur. So let's say that we had anything poop and something else and anything else over here. So anything poop, we're going to do something else and then anything else. And this is a class, so it goes into a dot. This is a class, so I could do anything else. If you have a class, if you have an ID, it has the highest weight. If you have a class, it has a slightly lower weight of 0.01, and then the tags have the lowest weight at 0.001. So if I were to have something like if I had a class called red text and another class called capital, and I had the background color of that being yellow, that this weight would equal 0.020. Let's just see what happens on the page. So we have, this is a heading and it's centered and it's yellow. Let's see who wins here. Oh, they're all yellow. Blue, green, and red. So we have 4 different colors. Green shows up to be the winner. Again, the cascading style sheets means that anything, the last bit of style code that runs is the one that shows up and the one that wins, which is down over here. All right, we'll take an 8-minute break at this particular point. We're going to have Road Home come in. I'm going to buy some treats for us all because it's Alex's last day. And then when we come back, when they're finished, we'll go cover Bootstrap.
Treat?